Get out of your comfort zone. In life there will be challenges, testing whether you're weak or strong. So don't let obstacles deter you. Just shake up yourself and move on, I tell you. Out of your comfort zone. You know that life is a mixture of the good, the bad and ugly. So don't stress yourself over issues that won't change your reality, I tell you. Out of your comfort zone. You have to get out of your comfort zone. You have greatness in you. Yes, you have greatness in you. I know that you have greatness in you. Oh, oh. You have greatness in you.
Yes. Oh, yes, from here on.
Yes, Brother John, thank you very much, my technical operator. And just remember, you're always the co-host. So if you feel up to it, you can join the conversation, although you haven't been doing so recently. But remember, you are welcome to join the conversation. This is the comfort zone for today, November the 21st. And I am Raphael Paul, your host for the comfort zone. Yes, it's Pablo. Back again with you this week. It's always a pleasure to be here on Gem FM. An opportunity afforded me by Brother John Caliste. It's a journey that started at the end of July. And as you heard the introductory song, it says, get out of your comfort zone. Because oftentimes we tend not to be willing to move away from our comfort zones. And it is in moving away from our comfort zone that we experience greatness. And this afternoon, I have a very special guest, but before I get to him, I want to remind you listeners who's been here before with us that the St. Mark COVID-19 essay competition that's been open to all students in St. Mark. Yes, the submission deadline was yesterday, so we're at the, and sometime before Christmas, we intend to give out the prizes. And so you can still make a contribution. Remember, you can check me out, Raphael Paul, Pablo, 417-7666. I'm all over Facebook. I'm on WhatsApp. You can check Mr. Cole Bristol. His number is 473-418-0382. And if you know, there are a host of other teachers. Now, all the other people I'm going to mention, they're all teachers, teaching at the Bonnet Government School and so on. Miss Carol Ellis, Miss Tikima Paul, Miss Fossil Charles, and Mr. Shad Noel. So you can still make a contribution, and your contribution will be very much needed, will go a long way in making this effort a success. And I want to say thank you in advance on behalf of the people, the students. And this, I must say, that this has been endorsed by the 3 schools in St. Mark. We have 2 primary schools, the Bonnet Government School, the Samaritan Presbyterian School, and we have the St. Mark Secondary School up at Waltham, commonly called Waltham Secondary School. So, at this point in time, we are going to take just a short break, play a verse and a chorus from a song that those from my era and maybe some a little later will be very well acquainted with. It's a song by The Merchant. It's called Let Us Build a Nation Together. Brother John, you haven't found it as yet?
Yeah, I found it.
You got it?
Now the election bacchanal die away. In short, this is what I have to say. Let us forget fights and grudges and concentrate. Come, let us sit and try to relate. Because now, more than ever, we must show discipline, tolerance, and production to build a strong and better nation. I say that is the main foundation. So come, let us work hand in hand, because this is our land. Come, my brother, come, my sister, and let us build a nation together. Oh, yeah,
Yes, at this point in time, it is my pleasure to finally be able to welcome to Gem FM and to the comfort zone someone that I've known for many moons now, the well-renowned Dr. Patrick Antoine. Dr. Antoine, good afternoon to you and welcome to Gem FM and to my very special show afforded me by Brother John Calise, who is our technical operator this evening. He is the owner, manager, you name it, of Gem FM. His platform, he's based in Canada. And so, good afternoon and welcome to you.
Good afternoon, Pablo. It's a joy finally linking with you and Brother John Caliste. I've heard lots of very good things. Pleasure to meet you online, as they say these days, eh?
I always remember us at the National Stress Council level back in the days, you know. Me, you, Tally Francis, Robert Ferguson, the whole crew. When
Indeed.
Crawford, Ray Meanwell, and Dessa Charles, and Patsy Charles, and the whole crew of us walking along in those days. So welcome again. And I think the last time we met was at the airport after Hurricane Ivan.
Yes.
It was busy.
Yes.
And I think that last time we met. But I've been seeing you on social media. So again, it's a pleasure to meet you and to have you at my platform here. And it's Pablo's show, so just let it go that way.
Yes, man. Pleasure to be at your service and the service of the people and your listeners.
Yes, man.
So, Dr. Antoine, in spite of the fact that you are a well-known figure, not only in Grenada, but throughout the region and elsewhere, for those who may be listening or may be viewing and may be coming, in contact with you for the first time through this medium, can you let the listeners know who actually is Dr. Patrick Antoine?
Whoa. Well, Pablo, Patrick Antoine is a Grenadian born patriot who was born in Mount Morris of parents from the western side and the northern parishes. So it's a coming together of, St. Mark's, St. Patrick's, St. Andrew's. My great-grandmother from St. David's, grandmother from St. David's.
TGM is a...
So really, what I am is a fusion of all these things, and they manifest themselves in me because it's brought, culture to mix with deep agricultural roots, to mix with education, to mix with village life, and all of that. And I went to the PBC for 1 year on my way back from Jamaica. So let me just say that I grew up predominantly in Jamaica. We left in the heat of the struggles with Sir Eric Matthew Gary when my father was an activist, and we we had to flee the country, and grew up in Jamaica, went to Jamaica College, returned to Grenada every single year, returned to Grenada, repatriated to Grenada in 1981, went to the IFE, taught at the IFE. I think I was the first student from the IFE to return to the IFE as a member of the faculty or staff. I taught economics and history. Then went off to the University of the West Indies, and I've been on an academic track all along. A big part of my growing up, as you know, Pablo, was the cultural education I got between 1981 and 1984. And the cultural education, I think, helped to round me, and it's helped to make me who I am. And that cultural education really was driven by a passion at that time, both with academics and with music, drama, and as it were, cultural expression, which took me virtually every weekend with Senator up to Guav. And of course, I encountered and became very, very good friends with your good self and with Margaret Tan and so many others in Guav. In fact, not only on weekends, but after school, the bug had bitten me, and I would find myself in Guav, which was just a hotbed of just deep culture at the time, from drumming to the food to the village life to everything about Guav was exciting. And I was enthralled by Guav, and at the time I smile as I think about Guav.
You have to.
Yes.
Some very good memories.
No, so that's who I am. And I'm big into culture. I'm still very much into music. Most people don't know this, but I'm perhaps the only promoter in Grenada that's done concerts in several other places. The Spice Jam promotions was a big deal. I did concerts in Antigua, Trinidad, Grenada, Barbados, Guyana. We did concerts all over, reggae concerts. And then from that phase, of course, I then, went on at the same time to teaching at the postgraduate level and so on. So really, I'm a fusion of everything Grenadian, yeah?
Yes. Well, I do remember those days in Guelph. I remember you doing dub poetry and so on during that period, as you said, with Roots Vibration was the name of the group.
Yes, man.
Yes, and you had Glenn Gittins on the bicycle, and you had
Yes.
Pai, the rope man, and it was some wonderful time.
Mm-hmm.
To get the conversation going, I want our technical operator is going to play a clip that comes from your recent launch of the Grenada movement. Because the Grenada movement is a new entity that has sprung up on the scene and is getting very significant attention from the Grenada population. In fact, recently when you were on To The Point program, a friend of mine messaged me from New York and asked me, who is this gentleman? I said, well, it's somebody I know very well, and I explained to her, and she said, I'm listening to him, and, I like what I'm hearing from him, So Big Brother John will play that clip that comes from the
TGM is a group of like-minded, patriotic Grenadians bonded by the fundamental belief that all Grenadians deserve a good life and are entitled to the equitable distribution of resources, irrespective of political affiliation, class, or creed. We have created a forum for the discussion of the issues which plague our nation with a view at arriving at consensus and solutions designed to improve the lives of the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. TGM is a vehicle for changing Grenada so as to unleash the full potential of Grenadians and the resources of our country, land, air, and sea, to make Grenada the safest, healthiest, friendliest, and happiest place to live, work, raise families, do business, and recreate in the world.
Dr. Antoine, can you tell us a little more about TGM? We've heard what was just mentioned. Tell us a little more about TGM. What really is the TGM and what is the essence of TGM?
TGM is a movement born out of a desire by persons from diverse backgrounds and diverse walks through our society to form a movement that gets over, that is not hostage to the recent and ever polarizing trend of the political tribalism that we see in relation to views, ideas, which are either the purview of one political party or the other. And we believe that a country of our size cannot progress in this way. And we've seen it when both administrations have been in office, where ideas, views, participation, acceptance, and ownership by persons from either side was either not welcomed, let me just say, the opportunity to be taken on board. And I think we need to work at two levels of making sure that we have all the ideas on the table, particularly at a time when our country faces these absolutely crippling challenges that has come from COVID-19. That's one dimension. I think the other dimension is that increasingly we find it important to have an opportunity for a fusion of cross-generational, intra-generational ideas and values. And we've been very concerned about the fact that so much of our social value system appears to be eroding and has been eroded. That's something that we feel very strongly about, the respect and regard for each other. We think that that is in trouble, and there's some very clear key indicators. Do something quickly, we're going to find ourselves in an even deeper crisis. So it's come from this need for us to move towards social cohesion. And we believe that an important part of that is going to be how we engage this ingredient, which we call the social capital. And I'm so happy that I'm doing this with you, because so much of what we did when we had those excellent events in Guelph and elsewhere, so much of this depended not on a transaction which was underpinned by an exchange of money. It was really done by people giving of their time, giving of their competence, and more than just giving, actually putting it together, merging these talents and these other assets that they had, these intangible assets that they had, to create so much success in what we did. I tell people the notion that you could do a whole concert and spend very little. You know, you did your thing with the drums, and you know, you were there in the day helping to organize while you did your normal chores and attended to your business, and people cooked, and there was just this energy that we can only capture in this thing called social capital, that caused so much of what you could do, or what I could do, or what others in the community could do, when put together, when merged, became so much grander that you know, that is what we need to go back to. And I make the point all the time, and I make heavy weather of social capital, because even in the case of you know, Tempe, where we resided at the time, we looked after the playing field.
Okay.
You know, and the playing field was ours. There was no ministry that sent people to cut it. If there was a problem with the drainage, we fixed the drains. The guys who weren't working or who worked a shift would put in their time. We would give them, whether it was $5 to buy gas, and we maintained the playing field to pristine standard. We marked it when there was a game. You know, we rolled it when it was cricket. Those things are gone and are fast disappearing in many other communities. And I think we need to get that social capital back, you know, which is really, to my mind, part of the strength of any society and any civilization. And that's why the US has problems. But the US also has a very strong ingredient, which is its social capital, that people must not underestimate at all. And so to my mind, TGM is really a vehicle through which we can do all of these things and manifest all of these positive attributes that any civilization needs at this time, and respect for elders, and how we deal with the youth, and how we take the time to assist those who are weaker is going to be some important things that we get back in our society without us essentially doing things that's either based on careerism, which is just based on the pursuit of your own career, or which is based on individualism, which is based on let me look after mine and my household and those close to me, and that's the end of it. And so we see TGM as being the spark that actually sends up a number of warning flares that says, here guys, these are the things that we need to be mindful of. We need to get them back. And we also need to understand that this is a time when civilizations everywhere is demanding voice. I call it the demand for voice. People want to be heard. People want to be consulted. People want to know that outside of just going through the exercise, that the consultation and the views are going to find expression genuinely in the decisions that are being made. And we find in Grenada increasingly the opportunities for that's been eclipsed because of all the things I mentioned. Who's saying it? What party they from again? What part of the country they from? You know, all of these things now means that before you even have a hearing of views, there is a determination of who the messenger is, or not even who the messenger is, but who the messenger's father or brother or community is. And TGM we have to get over that, because with 100,000 people, and I make the point, Pablo, that I went to the University of Florida for my postgraduate studies. On a game day Saturday in Florida, in the Swamp, that's the name of the stadium where they hold all the football games. University of Florida is a big football team, the Gators. The Swamp holds 90,000 people. The Swamp holds 90,000 people. And many of the games are oversold. So you have people tailgating outside. So you're talking about running a country with the same decisions that big countries have to make, small countries have to make them too. How you allocate resources, how you deal with justice, law and order, how you deal with national security issues, how you deal with transnational crime, how you deal with educating your people, how you deal with feeding them. The same decisions that big countries have to make, small countries must make too. But you have big countries that are cooperating more. And you have small countries whose population can fit in a stadium, and we're fighting amongst ourselves. We can't proceed like this, my brother.
Wow, that's a mouthful. That being the case, and with the social capital that you speak about, and being that kind of inclusive, we know that two very challenged sectors of our society are the women and the youth, and you mentioned both of them. And these were also highlighted in your launch. And I want to play two clips that come from that launch. So Brother John, if you can play TGM Women and TGM Youth back to back, and then we'll continue the conversation afterwards.
Here in Grenada, while considerable progress has been made with women's participation in Parliament and in senior management in the public sector, issues such as violence against women, declining access to quality healthcare services, and the lack of decent employment opportunities are at the forefront of the challenges we face as women today, just as we have
had for many, many years. We cannot continue on this course. Our women are the backbone of our society, and therefore for our nation to prosper, we need change.
So TGM Youth, and we'll continue the conversation thereafter. We'll deal with both issues.
Man in general is the seat of everything that is divine and grotesque in the world, and we were once known to lean to our divine side as a people, helping our neighbors, being our brother's keeper, and raising a child as a village. In recent decades, this has come under attack. We have become increasingly passive, focused more on self than community, and our heads, hearts, and hands are no longer in unity. This 21st century mentality, where we focus more on the I than the we, is not befitting of a small state whose founding premise was that of togetherness. To change the status quo, we must unite once more. It should not take a disaster such as Hurricane Ivan in 2004, which stripped us of all our material possessions, to take our moral and social responsibility to each other seriously. This is something we must do of our own volition, as it is one of the major ways that we can bridge the divide between the fortunate and the less fortunate and better society.
Now, this young man seemed to have internalized already all that you have been saying just a while ago. And we heard the woman's rep about the issues, although we've made certain progress, the challenges that we face. What can we expect from a TGM platform, from a TGM agenda in terms of addressing some of those issues and making it a reality within our beautiful spice country, pure Grenada?
Well, in a word, I think our country can expect a lot. Our country can expect a lot for a number of reasons. One, beginning with the two persons who actually represented us in the launch, quite interestingly, share coincidence. But then when you think of it, in retrospect, perhaps not coincidence at all. Garth Walters, the young man who spoke, first class honors, University of the West Indies, humble, came to me probably 2 years ago to assist with a project that he was doing. And he stayed at our office, I want to say, for about 3 or 4 days doing an internship, short stint. But he left an impression. And I was very impressed with him then. I wasn't surprised at his first class honors subsequently. But what always struck me is humility and the way that he's been well raised and well spoken. What we have in our country is a chance to have many more like Garth, who have faced his own challenges, but has been allowed with proper guidance from his parents and the society. I think he speaks for himself, really to manifest of his best in the ways that I think God has endowed him to be able to manifest of that. And of course, that manifestation for many people may come in sports, it may come in culture, and he and the youth are speaking for themselves on this. They have a group in TGM where they drive their own destiny and they're working on their own agenda. They're going to have their own development program, so to speak, with their own priorities that they set for themselves. And so I think the society has a lot to stand in anticipation as this group continues to do its work. I had the honor of attending for a small part the meeting last week, and I was infused by the energy. But what's even more interesting, which of course is a telling sign, is that they've done this themselves. And after I left that meeting, I understood they stayed 2 or 3 plus more hours defining what they want to do. So these are serious youth that understand the challenge that's ahead and understand the opportunity that we have to change trajectory if Grenada really is to stand a decade or 2 from now as a society and a country that we're proud of. Jenny Simon, again, Jenny is a young lady who, as you know, represented the NDC. She doesn't hide it. And neither do I hide the fact that, look, I stood and represented and was happy to have worked with the NNP administration. We had a a good run. I did some good things. We had some good policies, but people come to a point where they make other decisions, or they make decisions based on new information, or they themselves grow to a particular point where they view the world differently. And Jenny, I think, is a very good example of someone, a young lady, who I think really speaks for the commitment, and also speaks to, as it were, the heritage of the Grenadian woman. Jenny is strong, as you know, strong-headed, yes, but let me tell you, that's serving us in good stead, because Pablo, if you know how to listen to and channel the ideas of people who are strong-headed and strong-willed, who think outside the box, that's really what causes institution and organization and innovation. And I smile even thinking of it. But what's to come there is a woman's group which recognizes, from my understanding of what they're working on and what they will be working on, the role of women in our society that they've traditionally played, the new role that women increasingly are playing, and of course, it now calls into attention the diverse places that the leadership, the skills, and the sixth sense and other things that that women have, and admittedly that we don't have. And let me give you a joke. There are many things for which I come from a numbers place, but I would speak to Jenny and a couple of the other sisters, and they come from a different place. Many times they're right coming from that different place, Pablo, and the numbers may not tell me that, or the logical arguments may not tell me that. Not that their arguments aren't logical, we're coming from a different place, but they have this sixth sense, Pablo, admittedly. The older I get is the more I'm prepared to admit that many times the sixth sense is what really drives businesses and drives institutions. I am proud too that I have two daughters, and they themselves are involved in the social processes around the region, and they are all members of Black Lives Matters, and all of that change happening now, I think, speaks great volumes for what we are to expect from women in our group who actually rank from, people who are a little older, as they tell us all the time, to people who are quite a bit younger. So I think we have a lovely group where we're trying to build trust and build confidence and build consensus and mold together, but allowing each person's individuality to shine, to surface, but not in any manner that threatens the other person's individuality. No idea is superior to any other. And I think particularly with our women, they play a fundamental role in our institution, and you will see more and more of that. So I think that's what's to come, both from women and from youth, and we recognize their place. And I just want to say, as I wrap this issue up on women, that, I've lectured every year since I've been 18 years old. I'm now 56. Every year that I've lectured from 18 years old to now, this is the first year that I would not be lecturing since I've been 18 years old. You see women as high performers. Increasingly now, when we started, it was in Form 6, and many of them went on to do other things. In the postgraduate program that I teach in now, Pablo, I want to say that 65 to 70% of my candidates are women. And I want to say that in the last decade, I probably have had 2 males who've topped my program. Other than that, every year it's women. So that clearly there is just a dynamic role for women in our society. And I think increasingly they're finding that place. And our role really is to manifest and to help create the avenues for all people, both women and men, including the men who are falling behind, to be able to manifest their true positioning in our society, and to essentially be able to contribute to our society from a developmental perspective. So it's an exciting time for women, youth, and for us as well.
So women and youth, there's a point that I want to get to, but before I get to that, I want to play another clip from your launch. I have a few clips from your launch because I'm going to speak with you.
Okay.
Your launch highlighted a number of things, so it's only essential that the conversation, although we're going to get to other things, the conversation be centered around that. So if my technical operator is supposed to have lined up TGM economy, and I'm going to make the point that I need to thereafter.
In this period of existential threat to our human civilization, it is simply the wrong time for us to engage in business as usual. COVID-19 has blunted the effectiveness of traditional ways of development and the approaches and results associated with them. So, in this period of existential threat to our human civilization, it is simply the wrong time for us to engage in business as usual. COVID-19 has blunted the effectiveness of traditional ways of development and the approaches and results associated with them. It is now more evident than before COVID that we must address long-standing weaknesses in our economic and social systems. For instance, according to a recent IDB study, Grenada ranks as the 11th most tourism-dependent country out of 166 countries examined. Our over-reliance on imports of food and other basic items, and the stubborn level of poverty and inequities placed our society in an extremely vulnerable position. It is evident that we must now address the development of our people and the economy in a balanced, fact-based, and objective manner. Critical evaluation would indicate that the answers to the current situation do not lie simply in increased investment in tourism plant, arguably more of the same, but more so on how we bring about the transformation of the economy and the society as a whole.
Transforming the economy and the society as a whole. The challenges coming out of COVID-19, the challenges that many people face, especially in the rural communities. And it is against that background I just want to share with you. I highlighted it early at the beginning of the program, but you had not signed in as yet, that I've teamed up with a group of teachers in St. Mark here, and we've organized what we call the St. Mark COVID-19 essay competition, where we have students through the, as you know, there's 2 primary schools in St. Mark and 1 secondary school. So children based on age category, 7 to 9, 10 to 12, and 13 to 15-year-olds, are required to write essays on the COVID-19. They all have their specific topics and so, and we intend to give prizes sometime in the run-up to Christmas. In fact, the deadline for submission was yesterday. So probably, you know, you and the TGM might be able to make a contribution to that, because one of the challenges that's faced in this community too is the fact that the education system and the approach to education and the medium that's used to give instructions and to send out assignments and so is going to be the technology, and children need to have tablets and access to internet and so. And in a conversation with one of the principals, she said to me, is not only that they don't have internet access, many of them don't even have electricity at home. You know, so it's against that background that we've put this together, and we're looking to build that into something more significant and so going forward. So maybe you and the TGM might be able to make a contribution to that. I'm making that request here boldly on the comfort zone. But I say this to make the point of the challenges that's faced economically, and you know, it is very critical in the rural communities in particular. Well, when tourism was booming, we were moving from the rural communities into the south for jobs and so. That is not the case presently. And we tend not to have learned the lesson that we ought to have learned from that COVID experience. And we're still not seeing, well, to the satisfaction of many, any significant transformation in that regard in terms of making agriculture, and you spoke about self-sufficiency, and so become a reality for us. Can you speak to that issue? And while we're on that too, in terms of the women construct and the youth construct that you have, what kind of rural participation? Because we have and he often speaks about the disparity between town and country, and everything is St. George's, and the need for the rural economy. What's your take on that, and what do you have to offer in that regard?
Yeah, well, Pablo boy, I identify with everything that you've said because I've come from it. That's the first thing. And when we have these programs, it's really important for me because I heard some young people talking at one time recently. It was actually sent to me by my son. This is the way the technology is. He's in the United States. He's in law school. And he sent me this thing because someone got it and sent it to him. And he found it so amusing because clearly he knows of where we have come from in terms of our heritage. And it was making the point that I was the beneficiary of good fortune, and that I had come from a wealthy background, and I was wealthy, so I don't understand anything about poor people and what gives me the right to speak. And of course, he was dying laughing with all the emojis about it because I actually was born into perhaps the poorest family in Mount Morris. My father, not wanting anything from his parents, decided that he and my mother would strike out on their own. My mother's father, of course, had left for Trinidad, and she was brought up with his mother. I was born into a situation where I grew up with my great-grandmother for my first 5 years. So I understand poverty in ways that is remarkable, but I also understand the dignity that went along with that kind of poverty. I don't know what it's like, Pablo, to be hungry. And God would strike me if I ever gave that impression, because my great-grandmother on a square foot of land, her name is Elfrida Gilbert, well known in the community in Mount Morris. Miss Elfrida, as they called her, died at 104, going on 5 years old, walked out and was very active until she was 103, and then of course she broke her hand and it was downhill. I make that point because I pay tribute to her today, as I always do, on a square foot of land. Literally, if you wish and you want the exact measurement, it's about 7,000 square foot of land. We were never without food. Pablo, there was always corn in the cellar, and eddos in the cellar, and sweet potatoes in the cellar, and peas in bag on 7,000 square foot of land. And so I identify with the issue of transformation, because then at an early age I understood that if we could get families to do that, what it would mean for food self-sufficiency. And the challenge that we have now with the migration pattern is that we essentially abandoned the rural community, and with it the food production system, until there is a crisis, and then we go back to it. The other problem we have too is the cost of food, which of course is a supply side problem that we must solve, and TGM has solutions for that. And the other issue is productivity, because if you want to essentially be a farmer and to produce things that maintains a particular lifestyle, and you can't go up in the price, then you have to grow up in your productivity, what you produce, the amount of what you produce. And of course, if we want to compete and export, which we must do to replace the things that we once exported when we were among the biggest exporters in the Eastern Caribbean, in the Windward Islands even, then it means that we have to have a price point and we have to have productivity that matches the rest of the world. And that's not the case now. So that's in terms of transformation, what we need to do and how to do it. I think TGM is well placed, and we are in fact going to be speaking to that in our agenda. On the issue with education, let me say to you that because I've come from the family I've come from, where my great-grandmother was uneducated, but my mother was a principal at the Monk Norris Anglican School. I came from a background where education was just, it was the priority in our family. And so, you know, even when there was no electricity, and we got electricity perhaps when I was 3, you grew up reading by candlelight. Yes? And so because education is the key for small countries, and we know that to be the case, it's been proven in all kinds of economic studies, but you can see it around you. Then it means that we have to do more for those kids in the rural community who don't have the technology and who don't have the reach, the access, not just technology, sometimes the books to get where they need to get to. And that is why when we had problems with the teachers, I took such a personal position on the fact that some of the rhetoric around the teachers and their demands was so unfair. Because having been a teacher myself, but I did tell you my mother was a head teacher, and my father was also a teacher at GBSS before he went off to study. And my great-grandmother, of course, was the greatest teacher because she would make you sit down, and although she couldn't tell you what 3 by 3 divided by 3 would be, she would make sure you did your work and tell you it looked right or you couldn't be finished yet. Yes, so I grew up with that kind of competence around me. And so I grew up with that passion for education. And my mother coming from the poorest of the poor. My father and they came from the country, they had land. He left that and struck out on his own. But my mother and they had nothing. Let me repeat, nothing, right? Education is so important. We need to be able to provide access for kids who don't have anything. It's not rhetoric, it's not old talk. And let me tell you that my own family, and certainly for me, you know, people tell me that, you know, you should have been talking about these things all the time, but I'm guided by the scripture, which really says, if you can do good, do. And then the scripture also says, let not your left hand know what your right hand is doing. You don't have to do things and talk about it. All I would say is that I've been the beneficiary of support for education. And I myself, every single year, have supported an educational project. And so this one is certainly something, Pablo, that I can tell you online now, today, that our TGM will support that initiative. We have a number of colleagues who are passionate, as I am, about education. And we want TGM to be known as the NGO that, among other things, really supports education, education policy, educational reform, access to education, and to high standards. So I can tell you that we are committed to supporting that project in St. Mark's with the essay competition. And we are also committed to giving you some other support in ways that we can discuss. So that is how I respond to the agriculture point, which is to say that we are really some distance off from where we ought to have been. On the education point, yes, we have a few high performers, but when you look at the results generally, you have to be very concerned with what you see. And I make the point openly, right? We have not done enough to support education in our country, particularly at the primary level and the secondary level, where we let lots of people fall through the gaps. So what we are doing as TGM is that we've only last week entered into a public consummation of an agreement with Breach, which is, of course, a beautiful group of people who've come together, Michelle Alexander and her team, and their teachers who are providing instruction and support to persons who dropped out at the secondary level or didn't get subjects at the secondary level. They're giving instruction to them so that they can sit exams and get the qualifications that's required. And we thought that was an important initiative for us to support. And though we were very, very young, we are young, we thought that this was something that we couldn't let go unsupported, because there were moments when I'm sure Michelle and others felt the support they needed to sustain this thing would not be had. So what we're doing with them, we want to be a model to what others in our society should do. And we're supporting them with their office in Grenville. We're supporting them with the technology that they need for the teachers. This is what we're doing, and we're supporting them as well by supporting some young people to provide some coordination and management for them. That's not politics. That's something that we have to do. If we don't do it, Pablo, or we're going to lose a big part of the next generation. We're going to lose a big part of the next generation. The rest of the world is not waiting for us. When our kids go to New York, or they go to Canada, or they go, to Saudi Arabia, because the world is becoming flatter, yes, in terms of the access to information and jobs. They will be competing against people who are more qualified than they are and more adept to deal with the world. And even, Pablo, for the young men in Guave, who were so great at what they did, they could fix anything, right? When it comes to fishing, they had talents that were just multidimensional. We have to get them qualified and certified too. So TGM is not just about academic qualification. We're also about technical and vocational training. And we believe that where governments have not done this, that our society has to step in and fill the breach. Clearly, the government is the best person to do it. But we can't wait if government isn't doing it, because we believe that we're looking at losing a generation. And of course, choices are important. Where do you put the money? Do you put all the money in a particular form of the Imani program, which has a number of weaknesses? Or do you take a lot of that money and put it towards programs where people can be certified so they can take up jobs globally? Education, Pablo, you've touched a nerve. Education is where small states must go. We must have a human resource, if you wish, an education revolution in our country over the next 10 years. That is one of the transformations we need to see.
Well, I can tell you a community like this, where I'm at here in St. Mark, a community like this would do well with something like an IT center, because as I said earlier on, many of the young people, in the period of the lockdown, speaking with some of the teachers, they were lamenting the fact that they're sending out the assignments, but the percentage of completion and so was minimal, because many of the students have to either wait for when mommy come home or the elder brother or sister come home, because they do not have handsets and whatever and so. And that's why we're giving first, second, and third prizes, and in those prizes, a handset, is really included. Speaking of the COVID-19 bill and the COVID-19 essay, and so the COVID-19 period and the COVID-19 essay, let's play this clip and we'll expound a little more on that COVID-19 issue. So if my technical operator would play this clip for me, COVID bill, and we'll take it on the other side.
So duty called. I had to say, not so fast to discriminatory application of certain protocols. Before I could recover from being moved to so speak, the Bad John COVID-19 Control Bill, better termed the Grenada People Control Bill, came sprinting down the street, trying to sneak through holes in the system and poorly constituted parliament to pass as law of the land until a vaccine was found.
COVID-19 bill. It was flagged by a young lady. She was on a program that we had here last night on GEM FM, Talking Point. And she's been out there, and I know that she's listening. She's made some comments in the shout box that we'll be getting to in a little while. But the COVID-19 bill, what's your take on it, and what do you expect going down the road? They did say that it was put on hold or whatever else, but we're understanding too that there's elements of it that's being passed through different bills that's being brought to the House and so on. What's your take on that COVID-19 bill?
My take on the first bill is that it was draconian. And before there was the firestorm, when it was sent to me by a colleague, and I studied it with two friends of mine who are lawyers in Grenada, before the firestorm, I myself was I was fairly shocked at some of the provisions. A number of the provisions, without getting into detail, because I think a lot of that's been said, a number of the provisions trample on, you know, the rights of private citizens and so on. And a lot of it was an overreach. So I think we can leave that there, because I think it was just not a very well thought out piece of legislation. And it was also the case that because it was so draconian and there was no consultation, it came across as being oppressive. My language is actually very tame on this one, because I'm not sure if it was so intended, but the truth is that when you read it, it comes across that way. So where are we? Look, man, this is a pandemic of the likes that we've only seen since 1917. And it's a difficult time for governments. Governments don't have, they were given no warning about how this pandemic would have impacted them. And even when it started, even I laugh, because when it started, we were talking about losing, 2 percentage points of GDP. But we were very clear that it depended too on the length of the crisis and whether they would find a vaccine. But early in the crisis, and our estimates were more severe than others, meaning that others were saying, 1.25%, but we fell 2% of GDP, which means that if you expect the GDP to be 4.1%, we expect that would fall by half. Then we had to revise that when we saw what was happening, because at the time when we said that, we were also very clear, me and a couple of colleagues who are doing some forecasting, and we enjoy it. I come from mathematical economics. We also said it depended on whether, in fact, the US and Europe would go into lockdown. And then they did, and we had to revise it. And we revised it by saying that there would be negative growth, and the negative growth we felt would be in the order of 10%. That's once the Europe and the UK went into lockdown and the stock market started reacting and plunging. And where we are now is that we're looking at 20%. We're looking at we're staring at 20% reduction in GDP in its face. The ECCB has talked about around 16. We think we're looking at about 20% reduction. That would be negative 20%, which means that you're losing 20% of your GDP relative to the previous year. That's where our estimates are. So that governments, no one could have anticipated this. So you give the government an understanding, bly on the fact that this is unprecedented, it's uncharted waters. I also am very cognizant of the fact that the struggle to save human life and to protect the society is very important. And in that regard, I think legislation is necessary to achieve those objectives and no more. In short, I don't need to have legislation that says a farmer who is going to the mountain, right, has to wear a mask, because if you look at the pattern here, you would know that farmers going to the mountain are typically alone. It's in the open, and it's really, we ain't have no mega farms in Grenada anymore. It's 1 or 2 guys going to work, yeah? But if you're going to be working in close proximity to each other, etc., you advise it. You don't need to be draconian. So it must do that and no more. It mustn't give the police the authority, for instance, if they catch them going to the garden without a mask, to arrest them. That's an overreach. It's not necessary. So there are a number of things, I think, which we need to agree on as a society. Wearing the mask is key. Sanitizing is key. Social distances is key. And of course, this is going to now have to be looked at in the context of a strategy where you can step up or step down. So the act must also create the opportunity for that. That's absolutely important. When it comes to civil liberties and civil rights, for instance, that if I'm driving in my car alone and there's no one there, that I must wear a mask, that's an overreach, right? And I think we need to just make sure that the act gives the authorities, and which authorities is important. The police can't be both enforcer and also be part of the judiciary at the same time, nor must they be given any quasi-judicial powers so that they could determine who is guilty and who is not. I think really we have to be very careful at how we separate those things. So to my mind, the act that has to come, right, must do what is absolutely necessary to protect the society and our citizens, but no more. That is the way that I think we need to look at it. Whether the act is necessary, absolutely. The act is absolutely necessary because there are some things on which I believe we're going to have to legislate, right? And we see the crisis in some countries where they've not been able to legislate. We're going to need to have the act in place to legislate. Whether the current laws that we have give us scope is a matter the lawyers will decide on. My view is that the acts that we have give us wide scope to do a number of things. And so to step outside of that is not necessary. So we need to be careful how that interacts with the Constitution and with broad constitutional rights. But the government, we understand, is struggling to try to find the balance. But that is not too hard because we now have good examples all over the world of where countries, and the WHO is guiding this, have put in place regimes that do exactly what is intended and no more. We need not try to be creative in this way because then it starts to look as though the legislation is aimed at serving another purpose. And that, I think, is where the society is, with suspicion in a context where already there is a lack of trust among the social groups and the social players in Grenada for a number of reasons. We don't want to accentuate that because we want to build social capital and bring our society together. But it's necessary.
As you speak about the whole issue of social trust, there is a concern that during this period, having to give up some of our constitutional rights in the interest of safety, that the government is likely to take advantage of that. And as we have seen, as you mentioned with the bill, it was an overreach. People are experiencing, situations like this out there. And there is the concern that it could become the normal thing for the communities and for the society. How concerned are you, or do you have any concerns in that regard?
Yes, I do. And I don't think that the first draft of the bill that was circulated and was subsequently pulled back does anything to diminish anyone's mistrust of the motives. I think, if you wish, what it does is that it adds tremendous fuel to this fire of mistrust that is destroying the fabric of our society. And I think we have to be very careful in the way that things have been emerging subsequent to that, which, if you wish, if there is a fire in Grenville, you can look at it perhaps as an accident. But if you have a fire in Grenville and then you have a blaze in Guave, and then you have another one in St. Patrick's, you start to think that there's a pattern, no? And I think what people are seeing is that they're drawing some synergies between a number of things that are happening, these fires. And I think there's genuine concern in our society. I know there's concern with the actions of the police. And people see that if you look back at what the COVID-19 bill was and the powers it gave to the police, people are linking that and saying, but there is a problem. And of course, my own view is that where you have these issues emerging, they have to be nipped in the bud and they have to be confronted, I think, in a rational manner. I want to use the opportunity then to say that in light of what's happened in Guave, which I was called on by a number of the young colleagues in Guave, a number of them who remain close to me and reached out to me the night of the shooting of the young man at his home. And I felt at the time it really required a level of investigation outside of the police. And I have a lot of friends in the police, in fact, a lot of family members. But I'm using the opportunity to say that I think the time has come for us to get an independent body. And I've said it before, I'm saying it again, to investigate instances and incidents in which the police is involved. I want to be clear. I have seen police abuse in Grenada. I've had a family member who was arrested and without being charged, was beaten by police officers. We have a police abuse and we have to acknowledge it, right? Where you have abuse in a system that's already bursting at the seams, these social tensions are going to create some problems for us if they're not properly addressed. Because we have youth who are unemployed, many of them are disappointed, a number of them are angry. I think how we deal with that is through a multifaceted approach. But what we don't want is for youth to lose confidence and faith in the police, because there are a lot of very good, let me repeat, there are a lot of very, very good police officers in our country, right? But I can tell you, and as a promoter, having been a promoter before, I can tell you, right, that there are instances, and were it not for the fact that you would lose so much time dealing with this issue, because there's really no complaints authority. You just let these things pass, yeah? We have to deal with a problem that I think exists. And to my mind, it's not good and bad and wicked. It's just putting systems in place so that a police officer too can get a fair hearing, and the persons who've been affected by actions that they deem to be outside the authority of the police, and the lawyers will come in on that, whether it's every act which involves shooting or discharging a firearm in a public place. That's the details. But we need to have an authority that is able to look at a number of these things to give the society confidence that they're not being quote unquote advantaged. And I just want to use the program to make that point, because a number of it, even for me, and I do know of persons who are close to a lot of these things and persons who've been impacted, is quite troubling. It's troubling for the police and it's troubling for me, because it brings down the name of a force where there are a lot of first-rate men. And it also weakens the confidence that the society has where a lot of these things are concerned. I sense a problem that I'm saying we need to address.
Yeah, because we see here that the police, they've done their investigation, and they found the police who did the shooting to be, to have not been in any breach. And as a consequence of that, it appears that the matter is now going to go to court. The family is bringing suit against the police and so on presently. I saw that was,
Yeah. And Pablo, not to cut you, but again, I'm not taking a side. What I'm saying is from a systemic standpoint, from the standpoint of a democratic society with norms and so on, and where we now have, particularly now, heightened tensions, but even without heightened tensions, you want to have institutions and an institutionality that people can trust. And I'm saying that trust is clearly not there. And so without taking sides, yes, I'm saying that there needs to be that kind of authority so that the Independent Police Complaints Authority can look at these instances and they independently can come to a judgment that the society can depend on. But the way it looks now, himself, no matter how hard we try, can't investigate himself. And I mean, that's a discussion I'm prepared to have. I've looked at it. I've done some criminal law. I've looked at the way it works in other societies. And, it's just something that I think in our small society, we need to be very cautious of. More so, even more so than in big societies where, for instance, you have a greater distance in the institution between the Internal Affairs Division, for instance, in a police force, where the officers may not know the officers that are involved in an incident. But in a small society with 600 officers, where everybody knows everybody else, and there's this camaraderie and this tendency clearly in and to protect, the institutionality. You need to have something that sits outside of that. And I'm not taking sides on it, though I have to tell you, in my heart, the night I grieved, and I've grieved subsequently, because I imagine myself with 3 brothers and 2 adopted cousins, 6 boys, being in the situation where, that kind of difficulty is brought home and in front of the mother. It really does hurt one's heart. It doesn't look good, but I'm not taking sides from a legal perspective. But we need to get an independent body.
Yeah, well, that sentiment is very prevalent within within the regular people that himself shouldn't be investigating himself. To continue the conversation, I want to play a clip. This one doesn't come from the launch, a clip that I call Nivea 1. So if Brother John has this one lined up and he can play this one for us, we'll continue the conversation on the other side.
I got a few calls last night and a few WhatsApp messages from curious people who would have seen or must have heard that I delivered the opening remarks for the Grenada movement, TGM, one of the forums they had last night. And you all seem disappointed. I am a grown woman. And if I decided that I want to affiliate with any organization in my country, that's my choice. I don't have to answer to anyone for such. There is a thirst and an eagerness for change in our country. NNP has created a culture whereby those who support the party are in that place, they are in that position where they feel Grenada belongs to them. And I, for one, have never been a fan of this government. I can't see how. And because I am not a fan of this government, because I cannot support this government, the choice of political support, my political support, has always been with the NDC. But I am not pleased with the lack of effort by NDC.
So this young lady, she calls herself Nivea Newman. Her actual name is Ashida Charles. And over the past few months, she has been doing a number of posts. She does these video clips that she shares on her Facebook page. And I mean, it sometimes goes viral, I can say. It makes the rounds. And as you heard her there, she didn't support the NNP. Her support has been with the NDC. She's not seeing what she wants to see from the NDC. So she's shown her support with TGM, and questions are being raised. And while we're on that, I just want to add that into the mix, because one of the young ladies in the shout box, she's posted a question where she says, why didn't TGM support the youth who were trying to have their own voices rather than pull them under your umbrella? What happens now to the national interests they were raising awareness of? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I'm smiling at the question, because in a real sense, I have found myself a lot of thoughts I've learned to smile at in my mind, because I think when you think through them, no insult or disrespect, you smile because you're looking at the angles in your mind without speaking first.
Before you go ahead, additionally,
yes,
there's another post from that same individual who says that they were attacked by members of your entity and they didn't see anyone standing up for them as a young female. Instead, she was castigated and told that they had no right to question you in public.
Well, let me just say that I'm not sure who the individual is or what this issue would be about. But a couple of things. I think all of Grenada, from the time I've been, I want to say 5 years old, and I participated in my first demonstration with a couple people who are still around Grenada. 5 years old. I smiled at it the other day. Terry James, I think he does some work. He did some work with Peter David and Jeffrey Forsyth and Cecil Bean. We were 5 or 6 years old when we went marching against Gary. And our fathers, Terry James and our fathers insisted in the middle of the march that we go back to school. From that time, I believe that everybody knows that I enjoy and encourage dissent. I encourage diverse views and diverse thinking. So that's me. And when I teach, my students will tell you that one of the distinctions about the way in which I teach is I encourage, even in my class, I want all views, let all ideas contend. That's who I am. In Guav, I would be at the center of an argument with you and others with different perspectives. So I don't have the DNA in me of intolerance. I like people who have and share different views, so I couldn't speak to that. And I know TGM has some values that also speaks to this idea of encouraging views. And we have some very, very strong people with strong views in there. If you want anyone with a stronger view, you clash with Jenny Simon, for instance. I say that smilingly. When she takes a position. No, we have people with strong views. So I can't speak to that issue about TGM and the personal stuff. I don't like to go down to that level. I want to stay at the level of principles. My own view is that we cannot at the same time want democracy, but want to circumscribe how other people practice democracy. Follow me? You can't say that because there is a group, then why would you form another group without encouraging youth to work on their group? It doesn't quite work that way. The way it works is that democracy is about people being able to express their desires and their predilections and their preferences, whether it's for one group, Pablo, or more than one. I belong to a number of groups. When I was in Grenada, I belonged to 3 or 4 groups, and not all of them shared the same ideas. A number of them had different ideas, but there were also a number of ideas that were common. So there is no view that says because a youth is a member of TGM, they can't be a member of a youth thing. We don't practice that at all. In fact, we encourage it because we believe that TGM has to reach out and has to be a convener speaking to everybody. And I belong to other groups, not only or necessarily in the context of Grenada, but also in the context of economic development. Some groups share some views that are similar to TGM. Other views don't share views that are similar to TGM. And we encourage that diversity. So I wanted to say that. But you can't say that because there is a group, you who are not youth, because TGM is not a youth group. It's a group that is deeply embedded and reflects the strata and the demographic of the Grenadian society. So TGM then, right, as this group that goes from, very young, youth, right up to people who are in their 60s going on 70, is a group that has a particular agenda without any offense or crowding out to another group that has another agenda. And we need to make that clear, because people have to understand that when we do it very often, you would have someone who is a politician looking at somebody who has an interest in politics and saying in a negative way, Pablo, that they're ambitious. Listen, follow me. That they're ambitious. Now, ambition is something that you really want to encourage. But what it is, it's an opportunity for them, as it were, to crowd out or to limit any other thinking that is going to clash or confront with theirs, right? But you can't have democracy like that. The democracy really is something that you have to give the right to the next man the same right that you believe belongs to you. And that's what I want to say on that one. But to use the quote that you spoke about earlier, where the young lady spoke about her view in joining TGM and her being, as it were, a big woman, I think I want to applaud the fact that people are beginning to realize that a lot of the fear that they feel, not all of it, right, is really perception. And that, you know, the Bible tells us that the Lord did not vest us with a spirit of fear, right? And I think we need to grab onto that because, you know, too many people in our country are dissatisfied, but they don't want to get involved either in helping the government change things or in changing things with the NGO groupings or in changing things with the opposition. Follow me? And I view the opposition as, by definition, part of the NGOs. The opposition is a non-governmental organization, but it has a political agenda. Colleagues misunderstand these things, and I find myself now not feeling that I have to battle on constructs that are broadly and widely accepted. Yes, TGM now is talking about the content. What do we put? Before you talk about who to put, right? You start asking people who say they have ideas. So what are the ideas? Not our people. Our people understand that we need to work on these, and they understand that we don't have all the ideas. But they can't tell you what are these ideas that they have. And you start listening, and it's the same old that we've practiced for 30 years. We believe that what we have to do is really to step outside the box and build an agenda first. And in building that agenda, the other things will come, or it may not come. But you need to build an agenda of what this future is going to look like. So if you're in the middle of a pandemic, and you said, as part of your jumping off point, that we've recognized that we're too concentrated in tourism. In the middle of the pandemic, the question becomes, are you going to increase the concentration in tourism, or are you going to diversify into other things? Because at the beginning, you said you were too concentrated in one sector. And to my mind, we have to guard against doing the same old because it reflects, because it's what we know how to do, because we've essentially traveled that path many years before. Because what we have to do is to use this time to reflect and to say, look, what are the transformational changes we need to bring now, right? And where does that take us going forward? And it means sometimes you have to do a rewind and a stop and rethink. You can't stop the country, but you can go into deep reflection and retreat and remodel. And I wanted to make those 3 points in just saying that the young lady who spoke was brave in saying that democracy means that everybody gets the right to express it. And to make the point too, that the same democracy that we talk about needs a strong opposition. We need more voices like that. Listen, man, we were so critical during the Gary years, and I was so critical during the years of the NGM sometimes. Yes, very critical. A lot of us at Form 6, you know, we had this view that some people would call a counter view. It wasn't a counter view. We saw some things that we didn't like, and we spoke about it. As much as you hear people talking about you couldn't speak during the revolution, a lot of times the guys would dispatch people to come to talk to us to explain things because we took a view, right, that we couldn't agree on this. And one of the things I've talked about before, Pablo, is when we supported the Russian regime then. When this was the regime which invaded Afghanistan. And we did a vote, and a number of us were very critical about that position. We are openly critical about it. And I remember many of us were spoken to, and we have to be able to speak, right? A democracy needs an opposition that is vocal, that has ideas, and people that are willing to speak. We have to be careful, Pablo, that we don't take this mask thing too far, because a lot of us are hiding behind the mask of social media, but we don't want to come out openly and talk about any constructive ideas. So you sit in the comfort of your home and you text all of these things, and at the end of the day, nothing constructive comes from it. So we wear the mask where we don't need to, but we don't wear it where we should. Isn't that funny? Yes, sir.
So I hear you, but this is the concern that the young lady raised, and we heard that young lady there speaking very eloquently, you know, and she has really been making an impact and been getting some attention, you know, with the postings that she has
Yes.
been doing.
Yes.
To move on, I want to play another clip that comes from your launch. It's labeled, I label it TGM Choices. So if my technical operator has this one lined up, we'll listen to this one and we continue the conversation on the other side.
To quote one of my early mentors and a highly celebrated economic historian, George Ignatius Brazan, Grenada is a rich country made poor by bad choices. There is no question that we have and continue to make bad choices and decisions, due in part to the fact that we've never played with a full team. But we've also underperformed because we've quite often not fielded the best team. The problem of choice has been debilitating in instances, for instance, with the decisions taken regarding the oil and gas resources, which seem to have all but disappeared from the public discourse, and which for the foreseeable future appears to have been relegated to a distant second or third by co-development partners.
So the issue of choices, you say we have not made the best choices and we've not played with a full team. What are some of these choices that you think that we would have made, and what would qualify as playing with a full team?
Well, the choices I'm talking about are the development choices that we are still to make, for instance, and that we have not made in relation to the productive sectors, and also in relation to truly developing the infrastructure, so that the kids that you talk about in St. Mark's today, having regard to when we started talking about you know, ICT, information and communications technology, back in the turn of the century, so 2000. Then we spoke about it again in 2006-07, and we spoke about it again in 2013. Today, you want to tell me that we still have kids when there's a pandemic who don't have access to these devices that are now standard in, you know, countries all over the world? It's a choice, Pablo. It's a choice. We made the choice that we would put our resources in other things and not put it into developing the telecommunications infrastructure. And there are some things that we are, TGM is going to speak to. But the truth is that we are not ready. Follow me. We are not ready to embrace this digital society that the rest of the world is. You want to tell me why it is then that even at the level of a professional, a lawyer, has difficulties, for instance, you know, just uploading documents in the middle of the day, if several of them are online. You want to tell me why, for instance, if you're in St. Andrews or someplace, you can't work because the infrastructure doesn't allow it. You know, you can't access things. If you're a musician, you can't participate in this digital economy globally, you know, because our infrastructure, bandwidth, etc., isn't there. We're not ready. And then, of course, issues such as cost. These are things that we could have grappled with, so that it's prohibitive for most people. You know, so the objective conditions aren't there. I'm putting it to you today that these are choices that there are countries that are poorer than us that have made other choices, right? And I'm putting it to you too, that the way in which I think we've embraced a number of things, for instance, the way in which we've embraced the development trajectory of the country, right? What would we go with first, right? All of these are choices that we've made. And a number of the choices have not been the best choices. And I mentioned oil and gas because I think we've bundled oil and gas development. I don't think it's been understood. It took me a while, for instance, to spend some time understanding oil and gas economics. But the truth is this, you know, countries like Guyana would have really started at around the same time as we did in terms of its modern set of contracts and the negotiations around them. My words are going to be important for people listening. I'm not saying that we started the same time with Guyana. I'm saying that all of this phonetic activity and the signing of contracts would have happened around the same time. And Guyana today, of course, as you know, is well placed to benefit from its oil and gas resources, and we are not. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I'm not pointing fingers at any administration. I'm saying that as a country, so therefore I'm pointing it at all of us by saying that we haven't addressed that properly. What's the consequence of that, Paul? My view, Pablo, is that we're not going to benefit from oil and gas in the way that we anticipated. So it's, and if we're not careful, mark my words today, a lot of that will stay in the ground. Because even as we speak, the cost of renewable energy is coming down so rapidly. It's making the extraction and the infrastructure that's needed to extract even gas reserves, right, relatively unattractive compared to renewable energy sources. And I'm saying that, I'm not saying it's going to stay there. I'm saying if we don't get it right, my friend, that a lot of it will stay there. You see? Because what's happening in the world is a phonetic pace of change. And let me say that a lot of people are looking at what a Biden administration would bring without understanding, Pablo, that if the pundits are right, and if the House and the Senate and the US gets its act together, we could see an unprecedented level of expenditure and investment in renewable energy that would make it even more difficult because it's going to drive innovation for countries like ours that haven't yet started extraction. I'm just making the point, Pablo, loud and clear. Those are choices. It didn't happen by accident, right? That's what I mean by the issue of choices and the fact that what is this playing with the full team? It means that whether it is someone who is a stalwart and a supporter of the NDC, or a stalwart and a supporter of the GULP, or some other group, that they are allowed to exercise their professional endeavor and contribute professionally in the field in which they're strong, that makes a contribution to our country. And we don't have that. What we have is that subsequent administrations, essentially what they do is that they identify and sideline persons who they don't feel carry their party line. My understanding is that apparently that's how it goes. That's not likely to change because it was so the last time and it's so this time. So my question to a country with 100,000 people is when it's going to change? You know how many people we've had come to Grenada and leave frustrated because there's a perception that they're not playing with the right team? You know how many people we've had come to Grenada and leave, right? Because, you know, even when they tried to walk the road in the center, there was a sense that they weren't political enough. And my view is that playing with a full team means that we embrace talent. Follow me? We embrace talent wherever we find it. And it's not just Grenadian talent, but it's Grenadian talent first. And then we embrace talent from other parts of the Caribbean and the world. We embrace that talent and we use that talent and allow that talent to make the contribution it ought to make, right? Without trying to disrupt it or cripple it or frustrate it. So that's what playing with the full team means, right? We have never done that.
As we run this, there's a question that came up early on, and I feel it's appropriate to share it at this juncture, given what we're discussing. And The person is saying, how does what you're saying now square with your many years in government? Can you speak to that?
Oh, yeah. I am very happy that I was given an opportunity to work for the government and people of Grenada. I was not in the political realm, so to speak, but I found it absolutely necessary to advocate an agenda when at the time others dragged me into a mold where I had to defend myself. The contributions that I made were largely professional. You know, the trade stuff we did it's just, I keep saying it, we did fantastic work. The stuff we did with the economy and the contributions we made there, fantastic work. I am not a party person. The agenda that I believed in of the new economy, now we've extended that to the new economy and the new society. I fundamentally believe in, so I've not strayed from that at all. I believe that that is where we need to go. Other countries are now talking about a new economy, and we had the foresight to sit down and start mapping out what that would look like. I don't think we've delivered it in the way that we would have articulated it, or in the way in which the country needed to move to the next trajectory. But we, to our credit, begun embracing this issue of the new economy, which has now become vogue. The word is vogue in a lot of countries, and many countries have also now started talking about a new society. So that I think that we need to really get back on track with what this means and how we build it out. Very proud about that. So I am here saying to you that my perspectives actually were contributed to, and I benefited tremendously in understanding how governments work, and it was because I was able to work at the level at which I did with a number of very good people to understand the workings of government in the way that I have. If I wasn't placed where I was, I would not have understood the way, for instance, in which the regional system worked or the international system worked at a negotiating level. But now that I do, after many years, I'm in a better position to make a contribution, both to the technical and to the profession. Let me tell you, all of these things, Pablo, have their idiosyncrasies. It don't just happen like that. Teaching economics and sitting down and doing economics and looking at the consequences and strategizing on options and understanding the real world impact of what you're proposing and how you tailor and tinker things to make them work in peculiar circumstances. That don't just come so. That has come for me because I've been able to work for the government and people of Grenada, and of course to do a lot of this work as well for the OECS and for CARICOM. So I'm very, very happy with the fact that I was given this opportunity, and the question of how it squares is answered therein. I've actually been able to develop myself as a consequence of having worked with government. I also know what works, what doesn't work, and why it hasn't worked. And if I wasn't in that position, I would not have been so located now to look at the practical manifestations of what needs to be done and also the pitfalls and opportunities that exist. Very, very happy for it. I want to repeat again, Pablo, on this program, I am happy that I had the opportunity to do what I've done for the government. The ideas remain. How we build them out may differ, but the fundamental ideas that I've had and the things that I've held firm to, those things remain true today as they were several years ago in terms of principles and where this country needs to go.
Speaking of this, we see that since the launch of TGM and in the recent weeks, there has been different varying responses. While there's been some very favorable ones, we have seen some that question certain things. Like, for example, we see writing in one of the popular weeklies. We see William Joseph asking certain questions of you about the National Sustainable Development Plan. your role in it, if there's any ideas for economic, cultural, and social development that you propose. Are there any ideas in the plan that TGM finds supportable? You having been chairman of the working group, did you maintain any interest in the finalization of the plan and so on? Can you speak? And I believe there was a response from you to that original article, and there's since been another one from Mr. Joseph. Can you speak to that development?
Yeah, so let me start with your last statement. I have never responded to William Joseph.
No?
No.
Okay.
My colleagues in TGM would have given an official response because we have courses for horses.
Okay.
And I was absolutely busy.
No,
it's okay, man. It's okay.
A colleague of mine used that to me. Say there's courses for horses and horses for courses.
There you go. So the team would have responded to that. I was too taken up, and other colleagues know what I was taken up with, matters in court, matters that we really trying to work on to get finished before the end of the year. Priority matters. And I haven't, up to now, I have not read the article. I have been told a couple of things about the article. The response went out, and I have not read any second response either. Similarly, those who listening would know of what I speak. I was in court on Tuesday, Wednesday in Grenada, and then on Thursday and Friday here in Trinidad with some other matters, not contentious matters including myself, but matters of a commercial and other nature. So I haven't had the time to read that. And interestingly, that week as well, we were able to get the CARICOM private sector organization, which I had the opportunity to contribute to launch. And that was a massive thing. I learned a lot from the exercise, and so we were extremely busy with that kind of work. So no, I haven't responded to Mr. Joseph at all, nor will I be responding to Mr. Joseph. I respond to ideas, not to persons. So the idea that somehow there is something in the strategic development plan. In my position, which is written and which the TGM group knows about, that I indicated from the outset, which was in an earlier draft of that speech that we did and in an earlier airing before it was cut, is that now that we've had the pandemic, Pablo, the strategic development plan as we knew it, 2030, that was written before the pandemic, that plan now has to be revisited. Follow me? That's the first point. The second point is that the vision in the plan, the big vision, Pablo, of the society and the vision remains valid. But the strategic options and directions and so on, that will have to be revisited, yes? And I think governments all over the region and the world are doing that. And it's not tinkering around the edges, Pablo. This one is not for tinkering. This is really going back to the drawing board and saying, look now, we have this plan now and so much has changed. What do we do now in terms of priorities looking forward? And how do we reprioritize? And then, of course, what comes with that is to position your expenditure and your implementation and your monitoring and evaluation and so on to fit that new reality. Okay, that's the second point. The third point is that my understanding from the NGOs in Grenada, not based on what Mr. Joseph said, because as I said, I really haven't had the time to pay attention, but in my previous preparations of where we needed to go before, I want to say in March, I would have spoken to a number of NGOs, and the groups know who I'm talking about. Major NGO groups in Grenada told me that they didn't sign off on that plan in terms of its final stages, and many of them said they had a number of issues with it. I'm not getting into that. I took the plan as it was presented, and I'm just making the point that I think we therefore need to be careful in what we attach to. I certainly believe that it has a number of good points. And the fourth thing is this. Yes, I chaired the committee, and I gave a tremendous amount of my time to that exercise and resources, both time and resources. I had 2 consultants with me who were members of my team. that contributed tremendously to that exercise. The vision that I just spoke about didn't just come about like that. It came about from a lot of consultations and also from a scientific exercise that we supported, me and my team supported very well. And of course, it found favor when it was consulted on by the team. So absolutely, we align with a number of what's there. But there are a number of things when I would have left that exercise that I can't take ownership for. We had written that with a particular framework in mind. In fact, the outline of the plan would have the first draft and second draft would have come from me, from us. And the group, of course, would have signed on and made a number of fundamental changes. So we can't divorce ourselves from it. But there are some things that are not there. We can't have a strategic plan that doesn't talk about oil and gas resources. I want that to sink in. A strategic plan for development for Grenada, which is 120 square miles, when our marine space is literally, right, thousands of square miles. I didn't say hundreds, I said thousands. Can't not talk about oil and gas and marine development. And there are a number of things in the plan that we found strange as I looked at it. But, you know, that's water under the bridge. What we need to do is to look forward. So the reason I'm making these points now, fundamentally, is that really these things don't need to be personalized. These are principled things. We're not interested in that kind of, those kinds of personal issues and who did what. No. We're talking about what has to come between now and a country where the poverty level is high and where we don't know what's going to happen within the next 3 years, where oil and gas as we knew it doesn't appear it's going to play the same role, although it's not in the plan. We were hopeful. That has implications for manufacturing and downstream cost. For debt, what's going to happen with the debt? What's going to happen with the opportunity to drive renewable energy? What's going to happen with Grenlec, for instance? How do we position that in the energy mix going forward? What's going to happen with food and nutrition security? When all around us people are embracing technology and we appear not to be, what's going to happen with the blue economy? How does the blue economy contrast with what we want to do in oil and gas? Is there a conflict? What's going to happen with developing the tourism product? Are we going to be building concrete structures and destroying mangroves? And because someone says that they're going to compensate you by planting it back, mangrove and the forestry that's 300 years old, that they're going to plant it back, that you just leave them because you want to have concrete buildings that make you the same as Orlando, when people who have heritage are preserving it because they know that people don't come for the hotel, they come for the experience. I want to talk about those things. That's why you heard me say in that speech, right, that we cannot have these same old approaches in the face of COVID-19, that it can't be politics or business as usual. And business as usual also means that we engage in these little expeditions where we get personal, which I'm not going to do. I'm way above that. And we start writing things directed at each other. Follow me and what I'm going to say next, where we set up these little false premises. So the false premise is somehow that the strategic development plan for it has this standing, which I'm told by the NGOs, be careful, it doesn't. Not them, me. And then we start attacking the premise that we set up. So the false premise, we then attack the false premise and then say, well, the false premise that we attacked, which hasn't been responded to or which has been responded to, then leaves these other. I'm not going there. Why I need to do that? Listen, I have so many papers written and journals and I have so many things to do that if I wanted to write something, I would have to write something constructive. But this is not about me. And that's why I think you will not find me responding to any of this. This is not about me. This is about the country. This is about so many of my family members, once or twice removed, right, Pablo, who don't have jobs. This is about the young people who call me frustrated. This is about people calling because they feel that they want to take their lives. This is about fishermen who have made investments and are concerned that they won't be able to pay it back and they may lose their boats. This is about farmers who are saying, yes, they tell us to plant, we plant. There wasn't that amount available, but now it's available and we can't get money back, so it's selling for $1 a pound and we can't get any profit, right? There are real people with real problems that we need to focus on, not about me. And I think what we want to do as TGM in embracing all the brothers, including the author of that, in embracing all the brothers, all of them I love, is to focus now not on personality, but on the future and on what Grenada needs to do. By the way, as I said, I love all of them. I love all of them, whether we agree or disagree. But we need to focus on the process and what we need to do together, because it's not looking good for our country, right? It's not looking good for our country.
Well, I greatly appreciate the points that you made here, in that it's not personal, and the issues that you want to focus on or you think we should be focusing on. But these things, having been someone who's been involved at certain level and coming here now and establishing the Grenada movement, it is understandable,
yes,
that within our partisan political environment,
yes,
that there will be people who will be raising a number of issues. And we started off speaking mostly to TGM's agenda, but I needed to get to this to
yes,
give you an opportunity to answer to these issues. And there's a two more that I want to address
yes,
before we close.
Yes.
So in that vein, my technical operator is supposed to have this one, TGM Poetry, lined up for me as we take it on the other side.
All pirates, yes. All pirates, yes. Or are we selling ourselves? Think about it. Or are we selling to every Tom, Dick, and Harry think flashes a check. To every Tom, Dick, and Harry flashes a check. Tuxedos and diplomatic ties in their neck, and with no disrespect, they walk in here ready to select like all Grenadians wearing a red shirt and hairnet. Welcome to Grenada. How may I take your order? I'll have the all-land special with a side order of beachfront and a large glass of concessions, and hey, go easy on the tax. That's us in retrospect. They don't respect us, these foreign investors, investing or infesting, coming year after year, and we neglect it because the plans they have suggested sound as impressive as the buildings they plan to have erected. They are erected to screw us over. Infestors, more like foreign molesters, come to tamper, fondle, handle, and exploit the limited resources Grenada and her two sisters have. Molesters or vectors of a virus that infect us with the need to consume.
Now, you spoke a while ago about allowing people to destroy our mangroves and, accepting the commitment to replant, trees that's been there for hundreds of years, probably, and so on. And I can tell you that when I put out there that you were going to be the guest on the comfort zone today, there's a number of people who's reached out to me with issues. So these are some of the issues that I'm bringing to you here now, because that's been raised. And I played this clip particularly because it's mentioned about people coming with their checkbook. And there is an issue in the aftermath of the 2013 election where you famously said, Grenada is open for business, work with your checkbook and come. What is your response to that?
Yeah. So I think very, very quickly, the issue of private investment driving economic growth, I think we all have to accept that. It's just the way of the world. And I've said this to, what's his name? Randall Robinson, years ago, when I took the position that we ought to get rid of the alien landholdings license for CARICOM nationals, follow me, because we still have it. And my view is that in the same way that Grenadians can invest in other CARICOM countries and nationals should be allowed to invest in Grenada. So the issue of foreign direct investment, in saying that Grenada is open for business, come in, there's absolutely no issue with that. But the question becomes, does that mean that when you come into a country to do business, that there are no laws or regulations that you must conform to? And clearly, that is not what I could have been saying, nor is that what many of our acts and regulations provide for. So that to say that there is a contradiction is really not the case. I believe that there is a role for foreign direct investment. I believe there's a role for Grenadians and Grenadian institutions to invest abroad as well. In small countries just like ours where there are good opportunities, and in large countries because you have to diversify your risk. Because if there is a hurricane or there's an earthquake and all your portfolio is concentrated in one business or in one country and it's shaking, it's going to damage us as we've seen. So there has to be these risk diversification strategies. So we ought to invest outside, and others, whether we like it or not, all the international agreements provide us with the framework for others to invest in Grenada. But when you come into Grenada, is there somehow an expectation because you've come to invest that you shouldn't have a building plan, that you shouldn't do an environmental impact assessment, that you shouldn't have a social certificate which says that you've actually consulted with the community and they understand and accept it? The answer is no. So again, I think what we need to do, because I know of the voices, but one of the things I will always do is to speak truth even in the face where it's not popular. I support foreign direct investment, but it must conform to our laws and to our regulations. It must meet with our environmental mandates that we've given. And where we don't have mandates that are 21st century, we need to create them. And for instance, if an investor comes in to do something that's new, that's not contemplated for by the Act, we must go and look and create the architecture before we allow them to engage in the business, even if we do it quickly by leaning on other CARICOM countries that has that experience. So I am very clear that yes, I support foreign direct investment. If you look at it, you will see the share of foreign direct investment in GDP is not insignificant. It is in fact because of foreign direct investment that we've been able to make the progress we've made in economic growth and as well in reducing unemployment. But it does not mean that anyone can come into Grenada unconstrained and do as they please. I can't go to the United States or Europe or Trinidad or Barbados and do as I please. You build and you cut down and you mow down a mountain without getting the certification, right? They will stop your project and perhaps never allow it to continue. There is no contradiction. What we have is that we have in our country a situation where I believe we need to have greater enforcement, and we need to let the technical level make the decisions more rather than getting other aspects and other elements such as the political element involved in some of these things. What happened in St. David's? Let me say it loud and clear. It is not popular, but I will say it for you today. I have a history in St. David's. What happened in St. David's is wrong. The gentleman should not have been allowed to mow down and to cut down, right, where I would go to retreat on top the hill and around the lake and enjoy it, and you see the diversity and so on. He should not have been allowed to do that. And he should not be allowed to say, well, yes, I'm wrong. Mea culpa maximum, I'm going to plant it back. There's some things that money cannot buy, and that's one of them. So I want to be very, very clear today. I cannot go to New York or New Jersey or Switzerland or London and do what he did there. And what he did there is wrong. That has nothing to do with foreign direct investment. It has to do with allowing people to flout the law and do as they please. Big distinction, Pablo.
I understand what you say about the Las Vegas area because I know that area very well. And I know during this period, this time of the year, that's been a nesting area for migrating birds. I've seen species of waterfalls that I'd never seen before in my life nesting in that area. And in that area, you have one of the only other pure black sand beaches apart from Black Bay you have in that area. So I really understand the damage that has been done in that area, because I was not aware that you had this dry forest lake and so on in that area until I became involved with community tourism development and stuff like that. While you're on that and speaking about foreign direct investment, the CBI program has been a major element of our government's agenda. And oftentimes you see defenders of our passport selling program making comparisons between the US citizens by investment programs. Is there really a similarity? Because while we sell passports, as I understand it, the US doesn't necessarily sell passport. Is you give them a green card, you do an investment depending on the level of your investment, and over a period of time, you are considered for citizenship. Can you just elaborate on that? Because I see that defense coming up all the time.
Yeah, Pablo, let me say that I believe that there's a place for a citizenship by investment program that's properly run and properly managed, and where all the applications go through CARICOM impacts. I believe that such a program, when linked to a country's economic development strategy, does in fact have a place. And particularly in Grenada, there are reasons why the program that's been linked to foreign direct investment has worked so well in some instances. I think we have some good projects that nobody speaks about. The ones that I admire most, of course, are not the big ones. The ones that I admire most may surprise some people, but there's a gentleman who is doing some teas and so on. That's a CBI project. And I love that project. I think it's really the essence of what needs to be done with programs like this. I think it's a best in class for me. I like it. I don't know his name. I don't know him personally, but he produces teas and a number of very exciting products, and that's a CBI project. But I believe that where there are, if you wish, processes that take place outside the framework I just mentioned, that they are dangerous to our country's reputation. And I believe it's really for the government. I don't have the evidence because I didn't work in the CBI unit, and I'm very cautious to only talk about the things I know about firsthand. But what you spoke about with the US program, I can speak about, because yes, it is the case that the US program is different because it's really a residency. And of course, then like anyone else, you are allowed to, live in the US for a particular time and then to apply for citizenship. And of course, the US program, I believe, is quite rigorous, and you don't become a citizen from day one. And there are differences that the lawyers will speak to, but your essential representation to us on your program today is absolutely correct. Which program do I prefer? Clearly, I prefer a residency program, and I'll speak to this at another time. I think a residency program adds tremendous more benefits, and it's less risky, and it's looked at a little differently. So there's a role for that in terms of making sure, and it seems to me as though the government recently and over time, they've sought to make the program stronger. But there are some things that concern us. It's not unpatriotic to say, that there's some things about the program that we're concerned about. When we hear a number of things, it warrants a question. And TGM is there to really ask those questions without feeling as though we are unmasking anyone. But my view...
When we experience what we experience right here in St. Mark, where I am.
Yes. Yes.
With the shrimp farm.
You have to ask some questions. You have to ask some questions. And I believe that a government has to recognize that accountability means that it's going to be asked those questions in very much the same way I am being asked the questions now. There is nothing different about the government. In fact, the government has an even greater responsibility by the people who elected them and whom they act on behalf of to answer questions when raised, yes, without feeling as though it's a personal attack, right? So my own view is that, look, the next couple of years is going to be difficult, eh? We don't have a lot of development space. We don't have a lot of development space to run. But I think we have to be very cautious about how we use the space we have, making sure that we do things properly, making sure that, for instance, Pablo, there is public, publication of the persons who become citizens in our country. Why should I not know that, this person is a citizen of Grenada by citizenship by investment? Why should I not know that there's a project that's been approved? I don't see an issue for that. And certainly, there are other elements of this that are not part of the citizenship by investment program that I will hold any commentary on, which is the component which has to do with, diplomatic agents. But that's another comment. People often confuse them, and I want to be very clear on your program today, is I'm only speaking about the pure economic citizenship program, with which I believe that we ought to support, albeit in a framework that is really rules-based and that is transparent, right? And I want to say that I think Grenada still has a little bit of an opportunity before these programs, essentially disappear, to do things properly, because we're going to need the capital to drive some of the things we want to do at home, albeit some of the new transformation things. And I'm not talking about the things as they've been. Some of the new transformation things, we're going to need some of that, those funding to deal with. Finally, it will help a lot. It will help the government. It will help me. It will help you. It will help the projects. If the government were to tell us where the monies from the citizenship by investment projects funded, where it's being spent. So for instance, Pablo, if you spend some citizenship by investment money doing a mile of road, right, or doing a building, say, to the public, right, courtesy of the citizenship by investment project or road funded by the citizenship by investment program, I believe that we need to have transparency and accountability on these things. It's going to add for all of us, yes?
Yes. We're coming down to the end of our conversation in a few minutes, and there are two more issues that I want to raise with you. Mm-hmm. And to do so, we'll go to two clips that my technical operator should have lined up there for us, and we'll speak to that afterwards. Brother John, you play me those two clips, governance and followed by nothing.
I want you to listen to this final one. We have a sitting prime minister. We have a sitting prime minister who admitted to taking money into his private bank account from undisclosed sources. And he insists on telling us that we don't need to know, that we are better off not knowing. Do you accept that? I can't hear you. Let me tell you something. In every other country in the Commonwealth, what would that be called? What would that be called? Corruption. What would that be called? What would that be called? What would that be called? Prime Minister Tillman Thomas must be called to give account. He must be called to give account. And he talks about accountability. And he talks about transparency. And he talks about good governance. Is that good governance? Is that good governance?
Next clip, nothing.
Just when we believed that this political season was going to be calm and civilized, here comes the fearmongers. Did you hear them on the television last week? Did you hear them pulling out the Keith Mitchell boogeyman? Didn't I warn you about it last week? But not even I could have expected what happened last week when they launched a broadside calling it the Russian problem. Not even I could have imagined that. Many of my colleagues, many of our NNP supporters, many of the NDC people are raising concerns about this. Let not your heart be troubled. And I want to tell you why. The man who raised the concern has a right to be anxious. Because when we did the polls last night, he was 370 votes behind Brother Clement in the Northeast. He has a right to be anxious. Wait. This man has nothing to offer you. They cannot point to any achievement that is their own. This man can only point to the achievement of 3 houses after 4.5 years.
Now, as you are very well aware, I have been the host of the NDC's program for a period of time.
Right.
And as I said, when I was going to do this, there's colleagues of mine who, well, not even when I was going to do this, from the time TGM was launched, you saw these clips and so start making the rounds, people sending it to my inbox and so. There you were on the NNP's platform, taking Tillman Thomas to task over monies that came into his personal account. It didn't have anything to do with his prime ministership. It was party's money. And based on the prevailing circumstances at the time within the party, the money was for the party and was sent to his account, which is different from a prime minister leaving our country, traveling halfway across the world to collect cash. Now, the money would have come through regular banking channels.
Yes.
So the bank had to be satisfied that the source of the money, and having worked with NGOs and so, I know that when you have to get funding as a small NGO, you have grant fund coming from overseas, you have to satisfy them that the money is coming from a legitimate source and so on. So the money had to be coming from a legitimate source for the bank to have accepted it, okay? And then we heard, the one who traveled across the world to collect cash, giving the ludicrous explanation about having used his credit card and was being reimbursed and so on. And then in the other clip, the issue of the Russians. What was this Russian boogeyman issue about? And the issue of 3 houses, we know for a fact that there was no truth to that. And even as we're here now, we see there's been posts in the comment section about having been on the platform of the NNP and so on. So how do you speak to that? Because these issues have come up, and you can expect that these issues will come up.
No, I'm happy in the way that you and I have always dealt with these matters, that we are very frank and in the cut and thrust of things, always robust. And so I'm not going to run from those issues at all. In fact, I smile because I haven't actually heard those clips in a very long time. So it brought back some memories. Look, this is the thing. In the cut and thrust of things, I'm happy that you mentioned circumstances prevailing at the time. I'm going to hold on to that. Circumstances prevailing at the time. The circumstances prevailing at the time were the circumstances where the party, your party, not naming any individual, had taken the approach that I was too involved in perhaps directing policy, participating in policy on the side of the government, so they would attack me personally. That's a matter of record. I have kept all the articles. That ultimately, by the way, led to my having to sue and my having been awarded with the largest award of $575,000 for defamation in the Eastern Caribbean jurisdiction, which is in the law reports. That's the context that was prevailing at the time. So in that context, I make two, having regard to the context that we've mentioned, I make 2 points. The first point is that the prevailing context at the time is that, as a number of people would have said to those on your side at the time, and I love the fact that you and I could always stand on opposite sides, as we always have, and we're not standing on opposite sides now of this issue, because I'm sure you will find you find an understanding what I'm going to say. But the Jagan, you know, if you attack me, I am going to attack you. Let me be very clear to the Grenadian public. Yes, if you attack me, I am not going to lie down. So if I get a sense over and over and over and over, 12 times, including that are blocking people access to the beach and, you know, just one thing after the other, that Mitchell give me land in lots of jests, all of them. If you attack me, there comes a point at which I am going to defend myself. And so I defended myself robustly, because I was being attacked robustly on the platform and off the platform. People are now saying, boy, we misunderstand you. People are telling me, you know, George Brizan told us all the time that, you know, we were wrong and we now understand that. Yeah, well, it's a little late. You went and attacked me already. If you attack me, I'm not going to just melt away. I don't have that spirit. I have a spirit of David, that if you come, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to defend myself robustly. And so what I was doing was defending myself robustly. But even so, I want to make 2 points. I have had the pleasure, because Prime Minister Thomas, before he became Prime Minister, and I would meet in the market in Grenville from time to time, and we had wonderful conversations. Some people, you know, polluted that, but in the fullness of time, everything comes back in a circle. You know that song, right? The world is a circle. After the elections, Prime Minister Thomas and I, we've had a chance to talk. And, you know, I was very happy that he understood, and he was able to look at me, and he knows that I never disrespected him. You know, even when I talk about things, I didn't say Tilly, I said Prime Minister Thomas. And you notice what I said? I want to be clear, in the same way that you played the text, because that's the way I'm bred. It's inside of my blood. What I said is that Prime Minister Thomas must be called to account. Didn't say thief, I didn't say anything. He has to explain to us. And the explanation that you gave, right, is precisely the explanation that in the political pecan on a platform, you could come back with or off the platform and say, well, look what they're saying. But in truth and in fact, look what Pablo just explained. And you could even drop a thing and say, them think we like them, but all of that is fine. That is political pecan, right? But I said he has to explain himself, and my view is that the explanation that you gave, right, once it fits with law, it's fine. So that there's no issue there. No thief, no pointing finger, but I've gone down the route and I've said, if you attack me, I'm going to defend myself. Carefully, because nobody can sue me. Carefully, right? But I'm going to defend myself. When Nazim is concerned, I didn't say Nazim did anything dishonest. I didn't say he did anything dishonest. Listen to the clip again. In fact, Brother Naz and I have had good relations with him, and sometimes we agree and sometimes we don't agree. I want to be clear. Sometimes we don't agree.
That's a human thing.
Right. We didn't agree, for instance, on the way that we would treat with the VAT. Then he came back and we agreed, and then he was under pressure as Minister of Finance. We don't agree on everything, right? And what I said in that clip, I'm not backing from it. I was very careful. I'm always careful in my language. I've been taught to be careful. right? I said what he had to show is right? Political pecan. Didn't say you do anything dishonest, and then it's for you to defend yourself. If you don't want to defend yourself, right? In a context where people go wink, wink, nod, nod, right? That's for you. But all I did was to defend myself in a way that no one could take me to court. And I could have taken many people to court during that election. All sorts of things were said about me, right? Including by people who are my family, like Brother Baptiste. But I just love them up and let it pass.
So in the Baptiste, who, Michael?
Michael Baptiste. Michael is proudly my cousin. And Michael have license. Michael say some things we see. I laugh, I get vexed, that pass. That's politics. Politics is like that. But the point of fact is that when you start attacking people, you mustn't get upset when they defend themselves. I want to be clear. If you attack me, particularly in circumstances where you have an upper hand and I can't respond, I'm going to defend myself. I wouldn't do so to put myself in trouble, and I wouldn't do so in a vulgar way, and I wouldn't do so by castigating anyone or maligning anyone. But I will not stay silent and let you just say what you want to say. That ain't gonna happen. That part ain't gonna happen. So the colleagues who are there, who I know feel a little hard done by, must think, boy, you know, look at all the things we say about the man. You know, look at all of these things we've said about the man. And in a real sense, even on the platform, with people texting me from your rally and saying, look what they're saying. And I say, well, what are you going to do? So you can't get upset when I drop a few things. We can't be so thin-skinned that we want to say, but when somebody say we think, and that's history, right? What we're doing now is looking forward. So where the people are concerned, I have always had tremendous respect for Prime Minister Tillman Thomas. Always. Never disrespected, man. He will tell you that. Never disrespected him. Right? Not looking for friends, it's just who I am. I've never disrespected Naz. Me, we not agree. If you want to disrespect me, that's your business, you know. But I have that makeup inside of me. And let me tell you something, and I'll shock people here tonight, this evening. Well, you can call it night, you keep me so log. Pablo,
Yeah.
Pablo, I had 6 cousins. I had 6 cousins who are ministers in the NDC government. 6 of the people holding ministerial offices in the NDC government were cousins of mine. 6. Yes? So all I'm saying is that we can't get personal about these things. You get it, you think, you deal with this thing, big man thing, you know? You get rough up, you give some back, you think, and you move on from that. What concerns me now is not the Russian problem where there was an allegation that somehow someone on the NNP side had done some things with the Chapel Cross in Calvinia Island, or what it was, the Pirate of Prague, or whatever that was at the time. I can't even remember. It's so inconsequential because that was that at that time. What concerns me now is what I said then. What concerns me is the Grenadian problem. The Grenadian problem is with a pandemic. What are we going to do to reverse this endemic poverty? What are we going to do to get infrastructure going? I understand that, you know, we're patching the roads with a couple feet here and there. Really, that's not going to last long. That's a waste of resources. It may give some people short-term employment. But we have to have better plans for our people and better plans for our infrastructure. What are we going to do about the people you talk about in St. Mark's, who this year and next year will not have electricity? Even if you gave them a device, will not be able to use it unless they charge it at school. What are we going to do with the youth who are out of work, who are out of opportunities to even equip themselves in this period, and who are running out of hope? That's what we need to concern ourselves about at this time. What are we going to do about the medical services and the fact that people continue in Grenada to suffer from ailments for which we do not know the cause, but for which there appears to be a concentration, right, of affliction in our country, right? And how are we going to give those people the help they want, yes, in a context where our healthcare system is under stress and increasingly people are leaving the country, right, to get the care that they need? What are we going to do about that? Yeah? What are we going to do about the digital divide, where the rest of the world is leaving us behind, right? And we don't have the backbone, right? The ICT backbone to drive serious innovation, right? How are we going to leapfrog that? Yes? Huh? What are we going to do about the fact that increasingly there seems to be a level of crime, right? Because the tensions in our society are so high, right? That you're starting to hear more and more crimes, which clearly are crimes of passion and crimes of frustration. What are we going to do about that? Yeah? How are we going to save the generation that's just ahead in a context where many of them don't have maths and English? And those who are so talented don't have certification to pick up a job in welding or seamanship, right? Outside of Grenada. What are we going to do about that? Right? Right? What are we going to do about the fact that we know now that people travel for the experience? Where we want now and should be focusing on developing the tourism product, right? That place in La Sagesse was Migraine Town, one of the first settlements in Grenada, right? A place that should have been preserved and should have been sacred. People all over the world should want to come to see where they landed in the New World in Grenada, right? And of course, where commerce and trade took place at that time, right? Instead, we desecrate it. And now I'm going to get in trouble after your program, you know, because a lot of my colleagues are not going to like what I've said. We cut it down and a man tell us he's going to plant it back and we take that. Right? And all I ask is simply this. Pablo, if you go to Florida and you go and you mow down something, you think you could tell the Florida Game and Wildlife of Department of Agriculture you go plant it back? That's the point.
I know.
Right? So I'm simply saying that these are the things that really we ought to be focused about. How are we going to build back social capital? Outside of Pablo, who has a heart, and from the time I knew him, was spending most of his time counseling young youths and solving crisis and trying to keep people from, you know, putting themselves in difficulty and working with this community project and that one. We are getting 100 Pablos from when you're gone. We couldn't pay for that, right? So those are the things I think that are so important to me, how to build social capital, right? Those are the things I want to focus on.
Yeah, got you. Now, it's time to shut down, but I need to get that one clarified before we go.
Blood fire, one more, blood fire.
I need to
blood
get this
fire.
One. TGM is a registered NGO,
yes.
But the question is being asked, is TGM a political party in the making? And given the broad perspectives that TGM is putting forward, how do you accomplish these things without having control of policy within government?
Yeah, so I am hoping, Pablo, to answer the question last first, that we can table a number of proposals to government and a number of positions on how we view the priority issues that the country needs to confront going forward if we are to make the transformation we want into a new economy and new society. I think we deserve the opportunity to present those, to present it not just to the government, but to the society. So I think we need to form this consensus on what this agenda is going to be like, and we need to put that agenda forward, including to the government. That's where I believe we ought to focus right now. If the government doesn't accept that, and if the people of Grenada decide that, well, this is where we want TGM to go, then TGM will have to take a decision at that time, and TGM has people, as I keep saying, a number of our people like being in an NGO. Some of our people believe, like what you've said, that we're going to have to start thinking about something different if we want to truly effect change. A lot of our people believe we need to build out the agenda first, and we need to test the system, because we mustn't just make the presumption that there's not going to be a willingness to at least engage or hear some of the ideas that we have. It's not a simple issue. It's not a popular position, because we are accustomed thinking in two dimensions, right? Either political party or not. But we're having a three-dimensional discussion here, which is that as an NGO, we believe that if we are to solve these problems, we have to be talking to everybody. We have to be learning from everybody. I am talking to colleagues in the NDC. I've talked to colleagues in the NNP. A lot of colleagues are afraid The colleagues in the NDC are less afraid to talk to me. Some in the NNP are. What am I going to tell you? I don't have fear. I want to engage everybody. I am not the savior. I don't have all the solutions, nor does TGM. TGM is not the savior, nor do we have all the solutions. But people talking to us, and people want to hear what we have to say, and we want to hear what they have to say, right? So we're just here trying to fill a gap, and in filling that gap, to play a role in strengthening our democracy and in returning our country to a semblance of a country where, right, there is good order, right, and where opposition voices, not just political party opposition voices, but opposition voices, right, which can be constructive as well, is important to the functioning of our democracy. And that is why what the young lady said in the clip that you played, right? I think what Ashida Charles, I think you said, is so important, because I think what she's saying is that they need more voices like hers. They need more voices of people who are making rational decisions, that I live in a democratic society and I'm going to exercise that right? I want to applaud her and to say that our country needs a lot more like her. By the way, you would know too that in our country, it is a lot of women who stood up to be counted in building our civilization and in providing resistance, even in instances where men joined later. Yes, it is women that played a role in our country. And, you know, my mother, who, of course, as I make no issue, is been a real pillar in my life, is one of those women, right? Forceful, yes, understands what she wants, and stands up in the face of resistance and opposition. I want to just applaud Ashida for the stance that she's taking, because she's taking a stance where many others feel the same way, but they're afraid to talk and they're afraid to come out from behind the mask of social media.
Thank you very much, Dr. Antoine. At this point in time, we need to bring closure to our program. I'm happy that we were able to have this conversation. We had to put off the previous one that had been scheduled for the 7th of November, which was actually the birthday of T.A. Marijo. You know, and I was looking forward to that one, but circumstances didn't make it possible. So I'm happy that you, you know, at such short notice was willing to come out here this afternoon and to have this conversation, so that all and sundry could hear you speak on the issues of the TGM and what it brings to the table. So thank you very much, and I look forward to us having more conversation as we go forward. It will be a pleasure to have you back on the Comfort Zone, and I have no doubt that Brother John Tellis will be happy to have you back on GMFM.
Thank you very much to both of you. I am, in fact, comfortable in the comfort zone. And because I'm comfortable, I'm going to be back, and I leave my people with love, those who share our view, those who don't share our view, nothing but love. We have to work together in this little place called Grenada, 100,000 people, right, to make this country what we want it. All of us, NNP, NDC, those in the center, all the NGOs, the next couple of years are going to be daunting, and we have to face it as a united force. So all hands on deck. TGM is committed to you. Have a good one.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and thank you to all those who joined us this afternoon. Thank you to those who posted in the shout box, and we were able to share some of your comments. And so, as you can see, I came here with a full agenda, and I had to do my best to try to get it in there. So thank you, everybody. Thank you once again, Brother John, and I look forward to having you with me next week, Saturday, on the Comfort Zone. Brother John Callis, yes. Over to you.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask, there's two questions, if you allow me, Pablo, to ask
yeah, go right ahead.
Antoine here. There is a concern that your statement about, like you mentioned about, you didn't imply anything that the money that the houses was from NAS, but was anyway. You didn't mention that his government funds are taken from government. Is it a statement, one that would imply, based on what you said, on a political platform, that the money came from government money to post to buy to build the tree houses.
No, I think what I said, my mother, Brother John, one of the first things she did was to teach us the precise use of English. I don't want to give anyone the impression that I misspoke. I was very clear. When I speak, sometimes you must listen, as a lot of not meaning you personally, a lot of the older people smile and kiss me. They say, well, we listen to you carefully. What I said is what I wanted to say. What I said at the time, no, I want to be clear. No, I will speak for me. What I said at the time is what I wanted to say.
Right.
So if you want me to say that I said this, or no, if I wanted to say that, I would have said it. I said what he has to show for it is this. It may mean that from his personal endeavors, he's focused on that. It may mean that while we were going through difficulties, right, as a politician, right, he was able to do what he'd done, but no one said anything about illegitimate. That was not the point at all. Just like I didn't say Prime Minister Thomas, I speak for me.
Right.
Just as I didn't say Prime Minister Thomas, and he will tell you that that's not what I said as you heard the clip. I mean, I'm very, very clear. So I'm not getting into that discussion. I say exactly what I want to say and no more.
Yeah.
I may say something that's an open question. How you interpret it is up to you.
Right. So would just for clarity on the thing here, wouldn't that imply that is playing political mind games on the electorate?
What do you mean?
I mean, like when you make this statement in public like that, people might perceive what you say without, like you say, without clearly understanding your point of view. They may take and run with it.
No. The perception that I give when I speak and I leave something open is left to the person who listens.
Okay.
So I'm not going to let the conversation go there. What I'm saying is this: I speak clearly and I make a statement. I leave the statement there without linking it. It is clearly left. It's not mind games. Nobody going to try me into that purist thing, because what I did was to respond, as I did at the time, to a situation where it was being said that I can't go into Barbados and a whole heap of things on the platform. Let's discuss that. But I don't want to discuss that because that's history. But I'm not somehow going to engage in a discussion that makes it seem as though my statement about someone who was a politician in a construct, or as Pablo put it, at the prevailing time, when they at the prevailing time were making comments and statements that were harder hitting than mine.
Right.
Harder hitting. I have a tape of it, by the way. Harder hitting than mine. And I meet my cousin and I hug him up. And some people tell him you can't say that on the platform, even up there.
Right.
And I made my statements. And it's not once or twice or three times. I have a whole heap of these things that were said.
Right.
And what I've said, compared to the things that were said, is the least of the apostles. And how the interpreter interprets it can't then somehow, well, that's mind games on the electorate, and somehow this is a no-fly zone. No. It's not going to happen that way.
Right.
What I will do is to defend myself very, very clearly. I will speak what I want to speak and leave it to persons to interpret. Right? Okay. That is what I'm saying. So it's not mind games. No, let's not use that language. It's not mind games. It's saying what I want to say.
Fair enough. NGO and emerging into a political movement. Is there any timeline that the Grenadian people should expect that the TGM will become an open political party?
But I didn't say that we are going to become a political party.
I'm asking a question.
No, but the way the question is put now is making it seem, if I answer it, that we're going to become a political party. So I want to qualify that, because again, I say exactly what I want to say. If the Grenadian people determines, and that's not something that I can speak to, because I did say the Grenadian people. So if I told you that the timeline is this, by answering that question, I would have told you that it's not the Grenadian people who determines it, it's me. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the Grenadian people, if they determine that, then a decision will have to be made. Right. I didn't say that if they determine it, that's how we're going to go. So there are two qualifiers there. And that's why I have to be so very, very clear in saying that I say exactly what I want to say and no more. The people of Grenada will determine by themselves, and then TGM will have to determine, well, right, if we go, how we go, if we don't go, whatever the scene is. But I am not TGM. And in any event, what I said to you is clear. We know that there are people who are in our NGO who don't want to go to a political party.
Okay.
They like being an NGO.
Right.
They like doing things in education, and some of them want to do things in health. And we are with them because we want to do that as well.
Right.
But they don't want no part and no political party called TGM or TGP, right? Or TW. They don't want no part of political party. They want to work in the community. They want us to build our links with the community more. All right? That's where they want to stay. There's some of our members who believe that, well, let's test the system. Let's test the system and see if the system is responsive, right, to taking on board our recommendations and in trying to get some of the directions that we want to go in the development part of our country taken on board. So they're saying, let's test the system first. And I believe that we have to give governments a fair chance to put the recommendations in place. In any event, the issue with Grenada is not a political party issue.
Right.
It's an issue of what to put. Right now, contrary to popular opinion, my view is that we do not have a robust development agenda ready to face the crisis coming out of COVID as we look ahead. My view is that even when you look at where we are with unemployment and with the tourism development projects, we are still going to face a challenge as we look ahead. Creating a diversified economy on a platform that we can truly call a new economy platform, where information and technology and digitization and the digital economy want to see emerge are going to be pillars of this thing. My view is that we're going to have a challenge giving every child access to the internet and access to the best science and technology and mathematics teacher in the far reaches of our country. And my view is that those challenges are big enough for us to focus on, right? And less so focus on the challenge of what is called a political party. I want to focus on the curriculum. I want to focus on developing an agenda for technical and vocational training where people can be certified. So even if they go to Australia, they can practice as a welder. Even if they go to Singapore, their certification is recognized as someone who gives geriatric care. We want to focus on those things and building out that agenda before we start focusing on whether we are party or not. Saying that you're a political party tomorrow is easy. The hard part is what to put, and then building a consensus around that. And let me tell you the next problem, implementation. How are we going to get it done? Who is going to get it done? Do we have the people to get it done? That's where I think we need to focus most as a country, and less so on the issue of political party. So at the end of the day, my brother, I think the challenge is great. I think this is big man and big woman and youth and so on business is society business. We're not going to be getting into the politics of personality. I don't think that's helpful. I think what we need to get into, as I said over and over, is how we deal with ideas. That politics, right, whether political party politics or not, is about ideas.
Right.
What is our ideas and how we're going to get them implemented? And when I listen to Grenada, my brother, I am deafened by the silence on good ideas.
Right.
I hear a lot of the same old, but I don't hear good ideas. And that's where TGM intends to fill the gap.
All right. My final question to you, in respect to what you said about when the Grenadian electorate are ready, what measures do you have in place to evaluate the readiness of Grenada for
Brother Caliste, you sound like my PhD examiner.
Let me say something.
No, I love it. It's really a credit.
All of us, you and I, Delbert Batson, we came from the same school and set up, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
Asking you a question based on who and how we was brought up.
Scientific thinking.
Yes,
my brother, we don't have any indicators, you know. It's like we are there working hard and our focus is not on the party. We believe that when the people, if the people, how the people want this organization to proceed, because a lot of them are coming into it now, they will determine that. What are the indicators? Well, you know, I can't say that we've thought through that because we're so not down that path yet. But I suspect that at the appropriate time, if this ever becomes an issue, in the first benchmark, they will have to decide, well, look, what proportion of you want to do this? What proportion of you don't? So I believe those are the kinds of indicators, but I couldn't see that I've even conjectured so far because it's so much not part of what we're focused on right now. Right now, we're focused on how we deal with infrastructure development and linking airport to tourism to economic growth to development plans to where the country needs to go. And we kind of focus right there right now and not on the issues of the trajectory of the organization. So I suppose the short answer is that, we will know when we get there, if we get there. The wise man may look at the child and say, the child in this case being us, and say, well, how are you going to know? And we will ask him, how are you going to know? And he will say, well, you will know when you get there, as profoundly as that, if you get there, So, I think that's really where we are. We are in this space where we are focused on one thing, but we understand the anxieties in the society, but we're not really playing into those anxieties at all. What we want to do is to do what we know needs to be done where the gap is. Yeah?
All right.
And only to say before you wrap up that Brother Naz and I, and Tillman and I don't keep enemy. I think you know that that's the way I am. So, yes. In the fullness of things, I have rapport with colleagues, regardless of what them say or I say. I love them up still, because in this cut and thrust of things, I know how to play football in the playing field in Tempe and get kicked down. Get up, go home and bathe, and you go down to the block by the Coke factory, and the big boys make you hug up, and them say, boy, you still vex, and the football match done at 6 o'clock, and it's 7:30 now. And I believe that all the people that I'm talking about share that same kind of DNA, where you don't hold these things, you move on from it. No, I'm very easy with all of the colleagues.
All right.